In my recently published book, Play to Potential, published by Penguin, I talk about the framework FLAVOUR, where I discuss how we can all lead a full and a meaningful life. However, a few pages in the book don't quite capture the nuances in somebody's journey. So in that context, I'm excited to present the FLAVOUR-ful Life series, where I talk to 6 different individuals who I believe are striving to play to their full potential and are leading a flavorful life. The first exemplar in this series is Ravishankar Iyer. Ravi comes from the Indian middle class with a passion for stories and storytelling and mythology. He gets 11th rank in CA, he joins IIMA, and then starts a career in consulting. But after several twists and turns, he finds what really energizes him and what gives him meaning, and now is a storytelling coach. I've known Ravi for several years. We've spoken and exchanged notes in the context of our respective podcasts. I spent some time with a philanthropic organization called Social Venture Partners, where Ravi also has given time helping mentoring some of the organizations tell their pitch story effectively. We've done some workshops with clients together. I've always found Ravi to be centered, balanced, contented, happy, and passionate about what he's doing. I find that Ravi has done significant inner work on himself and has been very deliberate about many of the choices and the risks and the twists and turns he's taken. I find he and his wife Praveena to be great exemplars of a life of contentment, meaning, purpose, balance, and joy. So without further ado, please tune into the first conversation as part of the FLAVOUR-ful Life series with Ravishankar Iyer. Ravi, thank you so much for making the time for this fireside chat.
Hey, thank you so much, Deepak. My pleasure is all mine.
We've been interacting in different contexts and different forums, so it's lovely to have you as a guest, as a part of the series, and excited to explore your journey a little bit. But just to sort of level set, Ravi, I'd love for you to give a little bit of context to what you do and why you do what you do. Maybe just a little bit of who you are, what you do, a little bit of the why behind the what, just for listeners to get some sense.
Sure, Deepak. Happy to share that. So I call myself a storytelling coach, and to break that down, I help leaders tell a better story of their work, especially in what I call as high stakes communication situations, right? And so if you kind of look at, if you zoom back and look at the context of what's changing in the world, especially when it comes to communication during high stakes events, one trend that you will see is that everybody is now facing a data explosion. The same person who had access to only X amount of data now has 10X, and then that's increasing to 20X. And of course, there are more tools available at our disposal to understand the data. But at the end of the day, the time that you have to explain that can't change, right? So you still have a 20-minute, 15-minute, 30-minute presentation to share that a larger amount of data in whichever area that you're going to be presenting in. The second big challenge is that while the time has remained the same, the data has increased, but the audience's attention spans are not going up. They're in fact going down. Yeah. So
going
you
down
have
is a mild way of putting it.
Mild way of putting it. Yeah. So they're crashing with this the amount of short form content that we're all bombarded with. So that's a big challenge, that people have to be able to convey some very serious material in terms of the work that they have done, in terms of the hard work that the team has put in. And it may be a high stakes communication event, might be like a quarterly business review, a client presentation, a project performance review, even an appraisal discussion, right? And these are high stakes because the decisions that are taken in these meetings can have big implications for your organization, for your team, and for yourself. And so it's imperative that leaders put their best foot forward, right, during these meetings. And what often happens is when you kind of ask the leaders, hey, how did that go? Like, it could have gone better. And especially if you ask the audience, they'd be like, hey, what was the point? What were you trying to tell? This is, कहना क्या चाहते हो आप? What was this? Where was this going? And so I've kind of seen that happen with myself when I was in consulting, and I went through a journey of my own, as we can talk about later. And then I've seen that happen with many others, right? So I kind of come from a point of view of that that there are these tools which I call as storytelling techniques, which are available, which can very, very well be learned. There is no such thing as a natural or a born storyteller. Everybody can learn them. And I love learning and researching about them. Almost like, I have a childlike enthusiasm to learn more about these techniques of storytelling. And that's what I've been doing for many, many years now, more formally for the last 7.5 years, but
Mm-hmm.
informally for like pretty much from the beginning of my career. And so what gives me most joy, Deepak, is to kind of, understand these techniques, to structure them, to provide, to figure out frameworks, tools, techniques, and then to share them with others in a way that opens up their mind to first the requirement that, hey, this is important,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully makes them change their mind in the 1 day or 2 day kind of a workshop or a interaction that I have with them, such that they leave that interaction with me with a new perspective of how to deal with these high stakes communication events, and hopefully some tools that they can kind of use for the rest of their life, and hopefully curiosity to learn these techniques on an ongoing basis. So that's
Lovely.
broadly what I tend to do, as I mentioned, through workshops, maintaining calls, etc.
Lovely. Love to explore these things as we move forward, Ravi. But I think one of the pieces I'm curious about is the family element, right? So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about maybe just what your family is today. Maybe just the key actors in what you would call family, and also maybe take us back in time very quickly. I'm curious about how people are shaped by the first 15, 20 years of their life. So a little bit of how did Ravi get shaped by those 15, 20 years, socially, economically, in terms of exposure. So maybe if we could talk about the family element, both the current and a little bit of the early years.
Yeah, no, happy to. So we have my dad at home. My mom passed away in 2010. There's Praveena, my wife, two kids, Advait, who's almost 12 now. He'll be 12 in March, and Swara, who'll be 6 this 27
Lovely.
Jan. So so we have our hands full in terms of managing these two, especially the little one. And so growing up, Deepak was in a suburb of Bombay called Sion,
Of course.
in a smaller part called Jain Society there, till I was at till about 11 years old or so. And then I completed my schooling from a small town in Maharashtra called Aurangabad. So in fact, schooling I associate more with Aurangabad, although growing up is more with Sion. But Bombay is kind of, you could say, home, right? Because after my schooling also, I came back and lived in Thane, and I did my college in Bombay. And so first 15, 20 years, I would say majority in Bombay, about 4 years in Aurangabad, but all Maharashtra. And so in terms of yeah, so it's when we look back at the house in Sion, right now, I would say it was a small house because it was about 400 square feet or so. And that time, we never ever thought that, oh,
Mm,
this is a small house. There are big houses. It was a
mm,
great house, and we never ever felt that, oh, this is inadequate. I think compared to majority of India, I think incredibly privileged upbringing to
mm,
have an English medium education, to have two parents who were nurturing, who were, talking and, taking care of me. My dad was working with an MNC since the mid 70s till pretty much he retired. So yeah, so I think there was no problem in terms of finances or any other way. So at least I never felt any of that, right? So incredibly lucky that way. But in terms of, I think, forces that I would say shape me, right? Reading would definitely be a
mm,
huge force. And I still remember, I think nowadays, of course, kids start reading much earlier. This
mm,
was in the early 80s when I don't think it was as prevalent. And I was in second grade, which must have been what, like 19, mid 85 or something. And my dad took me in Sion only to a small garage kind of a shop, which was a lending library. And that was my first tryst, a long, long,
mm.
long tryst with lending libraries. And my first book that I ever picked up was Chacha Chaudhary, right?
Wow.
And you can't go wrong with that as a first book. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. And I can read and I can enjoy and I can keep going back and take as many books as I want, or as many times as I want. And I think that sparked off an interest which is unending. And I can, like,
Lovely.
right now, I I read like multiple books, and the typical journey that any 80s 90s kids goes through, right? You go to Trinkle, Amar Chitrakatha, Chandamama, then you start reading Enid Blyton, then slowly from there, Agatha Christie, then all this Robert Ludlum and
Sydney Sheldon, all that kind of stuff.
Destiny Sheldon. Yeah, that whole journey I kind of went through. In fact, I remember 10th vacation, I had come back from Aurangabad and I was staying at my aunt's place in Sion. And there was a library called Ramesh in King Circle, in Matunga, close to King Circle. And my day would be like in the morning, take a bus, go to the library, pick up a few books, come back and read the whole day, do nothing else, right? I had no social life whatsoever. So, and I think I overdosed on fiction in that vacation so much that I kind of stopped reading fiction after that. So somewhere a twist happened and I moved to nonfiction. And now I almost exclusively read nonfiction because I kind of feel that real life can be so interesting. Why do I need to look for imagination, right? So and yeah, so that's been, I think, an enduring. I realized later that not everybody reads, and having the inclination to read, especially nonfiction, um, can be useful. Because a lot of my ideas that I get, what I implement is basically me exploring the world of books and then finding interesting stuff and then making it relevant for my audience. So I think that's been one, I would say, huge force shaping me. Other, like, a couple of things that come to mind is that the influence both my dad and mom has been interesting. Both were very contrasting personalities. My dad is extremely organized, structured, methodical in everything he does, like supremely prior planned. And he kind of instilled in me. I lean towards him in that, but not as like, not a patch on him in terms of the amount of planning he would do. But for example, he would I mean, once exams became serious, like 10th, 12th, CA exams and all, he would make sure he would not come and sit with me and, make me study, but he'll ask me, Ravi, what is going to be a plan for the study period? So let's say we've got 10 days, 12 days, whatever. So he would just say, make a plan. So, okay, we are starting, and especially this is important during CA exams, right? So we will get 2 months, 2.5 months, 3 months sometimes to study. If you don't plan it, the time goes and you don't even realize how it went. So we used to kind of really, I thought it's a common thing. Everybody does it, but I realized not everybody does it to the extent that my dad made me do. And that helped, right? So to just break things down, it was like classic breaking down a problem into component parts and then say, okay, this lesson on this day morning, then this day in the afternoon and so on. And often I would be disappointed that, oh my God, I'm not following the plan at all. But I think it would have been much, much worse had I not set up any plan. So I think that whole, even today when I teach, I rely a lot on structure and frameworks and ways to make the complex easy. And I think that clearly comes from him. And from my mom, I got this, thing of saying it's not all left brain and analysis. There's also a huge role for creativity, for being spontaneous, for being comfortable with crowds, right? So I'm what you would say as an ambivert, that I'm happy and comfortable being on my own, but I'm very, very comfortable with a crowd of people, and
Did
that's
she
important when
pursue
you're
a
teaching.
career as well, if I may ask?
No, so she did have a career till I was born, and I think when I was really young, I used to fall sick, unfortunately. So I'm kind of the reason for her leaving a career with a bank. She had a career with a bank, but I think in a way, she really found herself flowering when she moved to Aurangabad, because smaller town, and so suddenly more opportunities. So there she was very active. So she used to take music classes, Carnatic music classes. She used to write articles for a local newspaper called Lokmat Times. And there was a Tamil cultural association where she was, very, very active part of, right? So she was very, very busy and happy during those days. And I think she used to write poetry across texts, and the music part. So I think a lot of that love for movies clearly comes from that side, right? So I think that balance between structure and creativity is something that has stayed with me, that even today I see when I'm teaching. Both are important, and I think that's also something that helped me from the
And
earlier
maybe
days.
just the last piece, if I may ask you to reflect, how have your attitudes towards money been shaped by your first, let's say, through your growing up years, if I may?
So yeah, I mean, it's I didn't really have like a clear attitude or desire or goal that, okay, I need to earn so much. It was not really there. It was, of course, there that, you need to have something. I think in South Indian families, of course, a job is what you kind of really look for, right? And the name of the company was more important, right? So I remember during just after the CA exam, I was getting a job interview with HUL. HLL it was called then, and Hindustan Unilever, and I did not get through, but the excitement in the family was palpable. Oh my God, Ravi's got an interview for HLL. So I think it was more the brand that was important, that, whatever they'll pay, they'll be good enough. What was the general thinking? So I ended up taking a job with L&T, which was also kind of regarded as one of those nice, safe companies, right? So it was not really, so money wasn't really, in fact, I remember when I graduated from IIMA and got a job at Feedback Infra, I was pleasantly surprised by what they were paying me. I was like, really, you're able to afford that? And it was not clearly one of the higher paying companies on campus. So somewhere, I don't know where this came, Deepak, but somewhere when I was mid-teens, early 20s or whatever, I somehow got this realization in my mind that the money game is a fool's errand. That looking for saying, oh, I want to optimize for how much I earn, you'll never be happy. I don't know how I got that idea in my mind, but I probably used to see other people who who'd compare that, no, what, this guy's getting so much and this guy is now at this level.
That's
And I
very
realized,
early,
but
huh?
there's,
I
I
must
don't know
confess,
how. And really,
that's very
I
early.
was actually thinking about, what might have caused it, but I don't know. So I would kind of always see somebody who's comparing, saying, okay, X is getting more. I would say, but there's somebody above X, and but somebody above X is X, above the person above X, right? And so on. So yeah, I think yeah. So that has been something that shaped me quite early. So yeah, touch wood, never had a thing of saying, oh, I think I need to get paid more. At the same time, yeah, I think during my the current this I'm not doing charity when I'm working for
Of course.
corporates. I
Sure.
obviously the idea is that there's a value being provided, and you charge what you feel you're delivering value for. But yeah, so this also, training as that I do now is really a lifestyle business, right? So there's so much time that I get, so that is really you money is definitely not something that I optimize for.
Yeah, lovely. And we'll touch upon some of these things, right? It's not just there are multiple. There's like space-time continuum. There's something called money-time continuum, right? I think
Yeah.
so. It's worth keeping your eyes on both. So let's go back to choices, career choices, Ravi. You were a All India 11th ranker in CA final. That's like a stupendous achievement, man. I think. And then you worked in L&T for a couple of years. Then you went to IIMA. Then you worked for Feedback Infra for about 6.5, 7 years. I think till that time, I would say, while each journey is unique, this felt like a relatable journey of an aspiring, hardworking, middle class, Indian who's sort of, striving to work hard and do well. From then on, I guess in a way, you've made a set of choices which I thought were interesting. So can you just take us through maybe the key choices that got you here, and maybe a little bit of context on the why behind those choices?
Yeah, no, happy to, Deepak. So, I think the initial few choices were not really mine. It was really shaped by, by parents and, the safe driven thinking, right? That
Correct.
let's take the safe call and let's do one of those, reliable degrees. And um, I was actually a very ordinary CA professional in during my limited time that I worked as a finance professional in either in my articleship or even in L&T. Was, I think, not at all. I think I was very good at giving exams. So, which is the reason why you see those performances. So you asked me to give an exam. I think I'll do very well in that. Don't ask me to work in that career. So I think the choices started to happen post IIMA, right? So CA was driven by my dad's push. L&T kind of, that was one of the few opportunities that came. And it was during L&T that I started feeling a little worried about my long-term prospects for work, because I was not very engaged at work. It was an interesting role. The executive assistant to the CFO, Mr. Devasali, and he's a very sweet guy, gentleman. But at the end of the day, he's a CFO of a huge conglomerate. He's not going to have time to mentor me and guide me. And so I was quite alone in that sense. There weren't too many people I could actually get mentorship from and grow. And the role was kind of trying to read up stuff that might be interesting to him and summarize that for him. And essentially be his research eyes and ears, you could say, like a research assistant plus some other works. Because of a lack of, I guess, mentorship and guidance, I was reasonably disengaged during those 1.5 years that I was there. And then IIMA happened, and IIMA can be a bit of a jolt, right, to multiple things, especially your ego. And so I felt that jolt, especially in the quantitative subjects. And so it was somewhere like in the middle of IIMA where I was genuinely uncertain of, hey, will I be able to even, prove myself in whatever work? That huge amount of imposter syndrome had come in, right? I think I was just good at giving these exams. I don't think forget about, the mathematical subjects. Even in finance, I don't think I'm as good as I thought I was. So a lot of those doubts started creeping in. And I remember there was this Beatles song called Nowhere Man, which used to be kind of
Yeah. It's a
keep
big
playing
favorite of mine. Yeah. I love
playing in
that
my
song.
mind at that
My
time.
daughter and I have recorded a version of that song.
Oh,
Yeah,
lovely.
it's
I should listen to it. I should listen sometime.
Yes,
So I should
yes.
listen to that, think that's me. So I was really unsure of what to take up. So before feedback happened, there was a talk by this guy called Aditya Nataraj. At
Yes.
that time, he was with Pratham. I think
Yes.
later he set up Kaivalya
Foundation.
Fellowship Foundation. And so he came and just talked about Pratham's work in Ahmedabad, and I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, this is so important, the kind of work that he's doing. And Aditya is a very inspiring speaker. And somehow that put in the seed of saying to do some work for the social sector. I briefly considered actually leaving the placement system and, taking up Pratham, but I didn't have the guts at that time. So I kind of came back. And at that time, this relatively unknown company called Feedback Ventures came to campus. And it had a small consulting team led by a person called Gopal Sarma and two others called Mukesh and Monica. And so they were all, in fact, Gopal and Monica were from IIMA. And so the way they came and they spoke about the work that they did, it was in infrastructure consulting. It just seemed to tick a lot of boxes for me. First of all, the people, the incredibly sweet and charming people. Two, the work seemed to be interesting because you're trying to, in my mind, that story I told myself, I'm building India's infrastructure, right? Which wasn't really what I ended up doing, but it was a useful story to kind of take that up. And consulting was unknown for me then, but I said, let's take that punt. So I think that call I took on the back of those people and the sector, but I actually ended up loving consulting as a skill, right? And people, of course, give a lot of negative impressions. People have a lot of negative impressions of consulting, but I think there's a lot of value to what a good consultant can do in terms of really demystifying very complex, data and information that's out there and helping clients take critical decisions. So those years, 7 years with feedback in Delhi were very, very formative, and I built definitely the problem solving part, but I think more importantly the bigger growth for me happened in the communication part. And I was like most people guilty of just throwing information at that way. I got a request from a client, okay, let me just drown you in everything, all the analysis that I've done, and hopefully something will stick. And I still remember this conversation with a person called Abhishek Sharman, who's right now with Carpe Diem Partners. He was with a firm called India Equity Partners. And we used to do consulting for them. And I once asked him that, Abhishek, do you have any feedback for me? How can we do better? And he just said one line, right? That, Ravi, I think you rely too much on just sharing a lot of data and information. I think you should just focus on telling the story of what you've found. It seems incredibly banal, right? Okay, so what? Yeah, of course, there's a story in there. But at that time, I think that's what I needed to hear. It was about 2009 or so, 9 or 10. And it almost like clicked a switch in my mind to say that when you have a lot of data, it's not about sharing everything, but it's about extracting a narrative or a story. And I think all my presentations since then have kind of led with a narrative or a story. And so that moment for me is something that I'll never always be thankful to Abhishek for sparking that insight in me. And then a bunch of books also that I read around that pyramid principle. Actually, pyramid principle came later, but McKinsey Way, a brilliant book called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath, which is probably my most influential storytelling book. All of those, I think, played a huge role. So I think this consulting gave me the foundation material for what I'm doing now. So I'm hugely grateful for that time period. But between that and between now, there were two transition points. One was that, Aditya's talk was always at the back of my head, and I wanted to do something in the social space. I wasn't sure which area, health, education, or whatever. And at that time, I happened to read an article by this lady called, I think, Shobha Mitra Kalita. I vaguely remember. So she used to write in Mint, and she wrote about this thing that India has this dual problem of huge unemployed youth and companies or employers who are not getting skilled manpower. And so anybody who solves that problem will do a great service, right? And so it kind of seemed completely obvious to me. Of course, there's a huge opportunity there, and I'm sure there is a possibility to make this a financially sustainable model. You can charge some money from the youth and from the companies, and you're also helping India's livelihood and employment problem. So with a lot of those stars in my eyes, I kind of started looking up companies in that sector. And 2011 was when I joined a company called Be Able, started again by two IIMA alumni called Vijay Mahajan and Sushil Ramola. Sushil was the CEO. And again, it was the final call happened because of a conversation with the chief operating officer called Abhishek Gupta. So Abhishek and I have been friends since then, and a hugely inspiring person. And I really enjoyed talking to him. And I said, okay, this is the company that I'd like to join because there's a team that I'd like to be with. So 3 years I spent there, basically doing strategy planning. So I didn't change the entire work that I was doing. I was working more like a internal consultant, but trying to help them take better decisions by looking at data, by finding the right placement partnership, etc. So that call happened in 2011, and for 3 years, I worked there. It was broadly good in terms of the learning that I had, the people that I worked with, but where it kind of started falling apart for me was the original hypothesis of saying, oh, this can work because there is a demand supply mismatch is not really true in the market place, right? So this is a classic market failure sector, as we see in economics, because neither are companies willing to pay for training because they don't know that the employee will stick, nor are students willing to pay for a short-term training. They'd be happy to pay if it's like an engineering degree, a long-term computer course, but not for a 3-month hospitality training. So typically what happens in the skill development sector is that the government ends up sponsoring most of the training, and then your customer is not the youth or the company. So you're not building or optimizing for quality of the training. Your customer is the government, and you're optimizing and saying, how can we make sure that we get the government contract? How can we make sure that we are keeping all their requirements intact and their documentation stuff and their collection issues and all of that. So that's a completely different skill set, right? And I realized I didn't really have that, in me. So 2014 was when I decided to kind of, I wanted to do something else. So now what else? And here is where life took a completely different turn. And I need to kind of maybe step back and tell you that, while I'm reading all through all these years, especially nonfiction, history has always been an interest area for me. So I read up about Indian history, about global history. One book called Guns, Germs, and Steel is something that
Jared Diamond.
Jared Diamond, hugely influential. And so, while I'm taking a break from Be Able, there's about early 2015 or late 2014. I'm going for a trip to the south with my family, and we are in this town called Tirunelveli, which is deep south, which is kind of my native district. And there's the main temple in the town is called Nellaiyappar temple, and so I'm just roaming around there. So this typical South Indian temple, this big gopuram and ornate pillared hallways, and it's beautiful. It's stunning inside, right? And my mind is thinking, who built this? How did they have the finances to do this? What was the logic used in the architecture? How would you explain this temple to an intelligent layperson of 2015 at that time, and not dumb it down or make it about architectural details, which I'm not really honestly interested in an architectural understanding of that. I'm more interested in the economics of it, the politics of the place, the stories, the human stories, but nothing was really available. And so that's when this thought came that how about we try and make historical monuments interesting by researching. and then presenting these stories in an interesting way through an app. And this was when apps had become more and more popular, right?
And this
So I
was,
think it
you had
was.
somebody else to work with at this phase, or it was just you thinking of
Yeah,
this as a
so I
potential
was just
opportunity?
talking about this idea with a batchmate of mine called Deepti, and Deepti was at that time, I think she had left P. She was in PNG, but I think that time she had left, and her husband Siddharth, who was one batch senior to me, and Siddharth also an engineer, and he had a part-time, he was a co-founder in an app development company. So then our combination I thought was great on paper because Deepti comes from a marketing perspective from PNG. Siddharth comes from a technical, he understands the app development part completely. And I came from the world of the content piece, right? So we said, okay, how about the three of us get together and build this out? And they also had traveled a lot and they had really had great experiences when the storytelling was good in monuments like in Istanbul, in Cambodia. And so they also thought, yeah, this is a product that needs to be there for the tourist of today. And so that on paper it sounded great, right? Whenever we tell it to our friends, they'll be like, oh my God, that's a great idea. And
Hmm.
so we started in 2014, and you know where the direction is going of the story. And
But just to
when
pause
we,
there, just
yeah,
to pause
sure.
there, Ravi, I would say back to your parents and the communities we come from, and the emphasis on brands and safety nets and reliable careers. What was, if you can sort of explain what was going through the minds of your parents and were you married at the time? I'm curious about the family's response to some of these calls.
Yeah, that's a great question, Deepak, right? So it wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. I think credit to all
Hmm.
of them. So let me give you some context about. So I think for my dad and mom, the basic thing was ki, you have to come to one level where that insurance safety net is there, right? And
Acha.
I think that was taken care of with the
Feedback.
IIMA degree and feedback also, right? 7 years. So I think by the time they knew, okay, now it's up to him. Like if he wants to take
Time pass
crazy
to nahi
calls,
karega.
then time pass नहीं करेगा, right? And there is a strong safety net that is there. In fact, I remember the convocation speech by Raghuram Rajan at IIMA. He exactly used this word, saying that now you have an insurance, so feel free
Correct.
to take risks. And so I think for my parents, I think that was a yeah. I must tell you this, right? So my wife has been incredibly supportive. I'd spoken about during our just before or around the wedding time. I told her that I'm working right now with a for-profit consulting firm and all, but there is a skida in me that I want to work in the social sector and I might take that call sometime. So I did end up taking that call 7 years after feedback and actually 5 years after marriage. So she was supportive for that completely. Um, okay, so the I don't know whether I'd have been able to take this without a huge financial safety net that we had, which was my
Hmm.
father-in-law. So my father-in-law goes against the grain of typical Tambram, South Indians working with typical companies for the entire
Low
career.
risk.
So
Huh.
he was incredibly entrepreneurial. He was with L&T in his career, but he wanted to do something on his own after the age of 40, I think 41, 42 is when he set up his own company along with another partner, initially to do designing of industrial valves. And then they set up manufacturing. And, one thing led to another, and they grew and grew and grew. And so they really did very, very well for themselves. And he set up his business in Pune and they did really well. So he was very well off, right?
Understood.
And somewhere that so his balance sheet was our kind of final safety net. So we never had
Fair
to
enough.
kind of, draw on that. But we didn't have to worry about saying that, oh my God, what will happen,
But it's
future
half
kids and all of that.
psychological, right? Correct, correct, correct. It's just what if kind of a thing, right? In case I
It's a
take
what if
this
kind of a
decision.
thing, right? And
Yep,
I
yep.
don't know, Deepak, would I have taken this level of risk? Especially, I think Captivator was a bigger risk because BABL I was still getting paid.
Hmm.
And I was able to manage the house finances. Captivator was the bigger, and it was only a
Captivator is
one and a
the
is
Captivator is a
a
storytelling thing, huh?
storytelling, the
The
history storytelling
historical.
app,
Understood.
historical
Okay.
storytelling app, and about a 1.5 year free fall where I was not earning anything.
Hmm.
I don't know or think I would have been able to take that call without that safety net. I think
I like the
so.
term free
Yeah.
fall. I use that often as well because the feeling of weightlessness is extremely uncomfortable for people, especially when you're transitioning. I use it in the context of people taking a break. I say I take a 6 month break, 1 year break, and then explore, right? And that 1 year is a free fall. Like you don't have anything to latch on to, and it can be extremely anxiety inducing. for a lot of people. So sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No,
You were
no, no.
talking
It was
about.
completely on a
Hmm,
wing and a prayer, Deepak. There was no.
hmm,
Um, I think yeah, this is how startup dreams are done, right? People just kind of jump and then they say we'll figure out something.
fair.
And to cut a long story short on Captivator, it didn't pick up, right? And I think we did our best in terms of reaching out to the right audiences. We did
Hmm,
our tours in Delhi, Agra, and Jaipur, the
hmm,
most tourist friendly places in India. And I think we did our as much as you could in terms of reaching out to the right hotels, bed B&Bs, and
hmm,
tourist agents. And somehow people didn't bite. The foreign tourists were
hmm,
coming, who were spending thousands of dollars on tickets. All we are telling
hmm.
them is, you're going to a Red Fort or a Taj Mahal, um, spend a few dollars on this tour. It'll significantly increase. But I think people's willingness to pay for content is always
Hmm.
a challenge, right? Everybody wants everything free, and I didn't think
Talk to
we
me
we
about
had
it.
had. Yeah, and so there was no monetization kind of a thing. And I don't think we had uh the courage, the mental, financial bandwidth to say, oh no, we'll stick it out and we'll make it work. Right. And maybe would have pivoted into something else by saying, oh, we'll offer other services and all. But none of us were interested in that.
Yep.
I didn't want to touch the government in any way. I didn't want to get
Hmm.
into saying, okay, let's make this a logistics company. Because that's all far removed from what I thought I'm going to be interested in, right? So I think we decided. And by the way, this was happening, and the other career also kind of took off while this was there. So it also helped me to have that transition from Captivator to training. So maybe I can
Hmm.
talk about that transition next.
Hmm.
So
But
that
maybe just before
happened.
you go there,
Yes, yeah.
I think it's interesting that you framed what you will do and what you will not do based on what you would be interested in, rather than where the market is, right? Again, I notice there are two different perspectives very often people take. Some people say, यार ये market है, यहाँ जाके हम ये company खड़ा करेंगे. And there is a group of people that say, यार मुझे ये करना है, ये करने में मजा आता है, and I will stick to this. So I'm just saying that it's an interesting way, not to say one is right, one is wrong, but I think we all need to stay true to who we are and what gives us energy, right?
I totally
Hmm,
agree with you on
hmm,
that, Deepak. And I used to always feel, if in my place there was a smart Madu businessman kind of a
hmm.
person, he would have said, forget content, Ravi, nahi chal raha hai. Chalo, let's find out what the tourists need. Let's talk to
पैसा
them.
किधर
Let's,
है? हाँ.
pivot. Paisa kidhar hai? And that's how it should be, right? Which is why people like me should not be running businesses, because we are not the right people to run businesses. So, and I hugely respect all of the people, because they find and they create great products for people who need
Yes.
what they really want. So I was just trying to say, okay, I have this solution. Please, will you take it from me? And people didn't want that solution. I completely agree with you, right? So, and you should figure out what you want. I think that is a trickier one. Often we say, oh, let the market want it. Let me do it. Let me stretch myself and do it. And I knew maybe I was also at an earlier age, I might have still done it, Deepak. But at that age, I was like, oh, this is not me. So I could
And I mean,
clearly,
just to give you a personal anecdote, this weekend I was in my community. I was talking to somebody who runs a investment advisory firm. He said, "Yeah, coaching business seems to be booming. I'm just asking out of curiosity, can a private equity investor come and invest in a company? And let's say, Deepak, you sort of hire 5, 10 people and you train them, and then you run a coaching business, and is there scale? And clearly, seems to be a need for coaching." And then I said, yeah, I want to be a surgeon. I don't want to build a hospital. So I think somewhere we all need to stay true to what gives us joy. But sorry, I think you were beginning to talk about the ramp up of your training journey.
yeah, no. So but I completely like. I think that was also an interesting learning for me, that when you try something, you realize how much you want it also, and that will drive how much will you go ahead for it.
Hmm.
So about late 2015 or early 2016 was when we were trying to make Captivator work. And so we were, of course, trying to add on more content. We were trying to do the work on the sales side, and of course the funding side also. Till this time, it was all bootstrapped, right? The three of us had
Hmm.
put in our money. Thankfully, we had not gotten any money from anybody else, because we were
Hmm.
friends who were asking, "Hey, do you need some money?" And so I thankfully, there some conversations also happened, but thankfully no money came in. It would have been, yeah, it would be tough for me. So one person who was, I was told to go and talk to, was a guy called Sriram Subramanian, who
Hmm.
lives in Pune. And Siddharth, who was my co-founder, he said, go talk to him, because he's also a history buff and he might be interested to give us some funding. So I remember meeting him in a barista, and because it was a important meeting, I remember the place, the time, and all of that. Somewhere in the afternoon in camp in Pune. And before you go to a meeting, you look up the person, right? So I looked him up, and then came across this firm called Mind Matters, which is what he had founded. And I realized Mind Matters is basically doing training of stuff that I learned during consulting. How do you do better problem solving? How do you do structured communication? How do you manage clients? I said, that's interesting. I didn't know that you could actually teach that, and people would actually pay you for that. But how much will they pay? I don't think it'll be too much. Were all the kind of questions in my head, right? So I thought, oh, that could be. I could, if the captivator funding part doesn't come through, maybe I could ask him that can I come in with you? So I actually went in clearly with that double agenda. And in the very first 2-3 minutes, he said, I don't have any money to fund you guys, but tell me more about your business. So of course, I told him about the captivator part, but my conversation then moved on to what he does in Mind Matters. And thankfully for me, sometimes, life gives you these, lucky breaks, right? He had space to take on more people. And I've been doing this for 7 years, and I think at that time, Sriram must have been doing it for around similar time. I don't think I can take on more people, and it's also a reflection of who I am. I'm not
True. And what
comfortable
you're building.
giving over control. Yeah,
Correct.
I like to be in full control of what I offer. But thankfully, he already had like 3-4 other people who were doing part-time training for him, and he had like a roster of 3-4 big clients, and then many smaller, not in terms of the company, but in terms of the work they did with him. So he said, oh yeah, I think I can take you on, and I can, we'll start with something. So he kind of course, looked up my credentials and all, but huge credit to Sriram that it is not like he said, okay, give me a mock training this day, and I want to see you in action. He just somewhere trusted, and incredible. I don't think I could do that with anybody, but the way he trusted me was really heartwarming. And he said, okay, I'm going to do a session with this bank in Bombay, 2nd March 2016, and you do a part of that. So I'll do the 60%, you do 30% or 40% or whatever. I said, yeah, sure, happy to. And so that's how I kind of ended up driving with him from Pune to Bombay with a bunch of about 35 to 40-year-old mid-level banking executives, and I ran some part of a session on data analysis. It was not even identified selling then. And it wasn't great. I think I was very stiff, and I was not really myself. I was trying to use somebody else's content, but I think I tasted blood. Ki, Acha, this is interesting. And then that was just the first session, and it was broadly positive. He gave me some feedback. The next big break that he gave me was in May itself of that year, in 2016, saying that this is a large client that I have in Bangalore. They are a large investment firm, huge back office, doing a lot of work in analytics. Do a 2-day workshop on data analysis, and he just left me to do it on my own. And I, scrambled, put up the content, put everything together. First workshop went off well, and there one of the senior members said, "Hey, there's this new book come which is called Storytelling with Data. I think you should look it up." And I read it, and it was actually more about visuals, not the entire thing, but I could see where I could use some part of it, right? But it kind of gave me the name, so that's when I called the course Effective Storytelling with Data. And from there it has been kind of one block after block after block after block, where I have been building the courses and the workshops, trying to figure out and reach out to more clients, and adding on more clients. um, and also, so one huge part of what I do is, of course, the training and the mentoring part. But the other huge part is writing about it, researching, reading. The podcast happened later. So currently now what I do is kind of two parts, right? One is the R&D part, which is the fun part. And the second is the monetization part, which is the training part. So,
The
but
advisory.
broadly, that was kind of, I would say, the last big transition. And then
Got
after
it.
that, it's been me just exploring and finding more big paths within this.
Lovely, lovely. And we discussed this notion of flavors, right? When we spoke, I think you've spoken about the family context a little bit, and maybe also touched upon what really gives you joy. Uh, I think what will be nice is if you can talk. You spoke a little bit about time and money, right, earlier in the conversation. Maybe cut to today. What does your pie chart of time look like, and what element of that is, the two things you mentioned, the R&D and the training, and what else goes into that pie chart?
Yeah, no, happy to share that. And when you asked that question, I was reflecting on, how that pie chart has changed over
Hmm.
time.
I'd
And I
love for
think
you to
that's
talk about that as well. Yeah, yeah.
uh, because the current state I am in is possible because of the pie chart
Hmm.
that was when I was in my 20s, right? And
Hmm.
so obviously, I would kind of divide this into three or four sections, saying that there is a pre-marriage
Hmm.
context, there is a post-marriage pre-kids
Yes,
context, and then there's a post-kids,
of course.
young kids especially, and then hopefully there'll be a different context when it'll be post kids who are older and once they are kind of ready to leave the nest. So the pre-marriage part was where I'm glad that the CA days had given me a very strong work ethic, Deepak, right?
Hmm.
Because during that time, everybody's working like crazy. You work, you go to college, then from there you go to an articleship, then you go for classes, you come home by 9 in the night and rinse and repeat for Monday to Friday. Saturday or Sunday, there will be like sometimes it used to be even Saturdays. And on Sundays, sometimes you have to go and give an exam, right? And you would not really bother about saying that, I'm working too hard because everybody's doing it.
Hmm.
So during my consulting days, there used to be a lot of stretch. We used to work late, and night outs were reasonably common. And I know there's a huge debate now in terms of how much work should you give, especially when you're young. I tilt in the direction of saying if you love the work that you're doing, and which is an important one, if the people are also invested in your growth and success, and you enjoy working with them, then over index on learning and growth, right? And optimize for that. The life part will come, the
True.
hopefully the money part will also come. So I think during those, the amount of effort that I put in during my feedback days is something that I think has held me in good stead.
Hmm.
For it was a great foundation on which then I could do everything else that came later. Even I think marriage did not change that. It should have changed a little bit, but did not change that much. There was a fair bit of travel. I remember I was like out for months sometime because consulting, sometimes you kind of go
Of
out for a
course.
long time. And Praveena was super understanding, and slowly things started becoming better towards the later part. But I think only after I left consulting, things became a little
Hmm.
more clear, easier from a work-life balance point of view. And since then, so since 2011, I've not had like a very, very rough working life. But to be fair, to be honest, I was also getting jaded and tired of that
Hmm.
lifestyle. And
Hmm.
yeah, huge respect to people who can do that later. But I think that beyond a point, it becomes very difficult. So I think that shift happened during my BAble and Captivator days. Things were okay. It was not really a major stretch. So coming to my current this from a work point of view, this is what people call as a lifestyle business, right? Because I'm completely in control of my time. I rarely have to work during Diwali and Christmas holidays because no trainings are scheduled during that time. And even during summer vacation, if I want to take a break for a month, I can do that because I can always schedule trainings
Work around it. Hmm.
post or pre-work around it. So I think that gives a lot of flexibility, which is great. And because actual training that happens would be like 1 day or 2 days intense, and then after that there's not much. So I end up doing the actual training part. Maybe it really varies month to month, but some days it could be maybe 6 days a month, some days 8 to 12 days a month. So 8 to 10 would be like an average, I would say. And so the rest of the time is honestly available to me. And
Hmm.
if I, of course, there's preparation that is needed. But now because the content is broadly in place, the only preparation is doing the customization for the industry and for the
Hmm.
company, right? So taking some
Hmm.
examples which are relevant. But otherwise, the ideas, the concepts are still the same. So that doesn't take too much time. So I could actually, just sit back, relax, read, do anything that I want. But there's so much that I want to do in writing about the ideas of storytelling. I want to do so much more on the podcast. I'm struggling to find time there. And I want to do some community-based stuff around storytelling in and
Hmm.
around Pune. So I was telling you this, right? Ki there is a song called Hazaro Khwaishein Aisi, Ki Har Khwaish Mein Dam Nikle. That there are so many desires that I want to kind of do multiple things. So there's a lot of um, desire in me to explore this world of storytelling in multiple ways. So to give you a couple of examples, right? So I've been working with nonprofits in how can they use
Of course.
storytelling to
You-
tell their
You've added a
work
lot of
better.
value to social venture partners as part of their fast pitch. So thank you
Yeah,
for
it's been
what
great.
you've
Yeah,
done there.
working with
Yeah.
committed partners like social venture partners, with ILSS, India Leaders for Social Sector,
Yes.
Unlimited India. So a lot of these beautiful platforms which give nonprofits a way to grow and learn. Then I'd want to do something in storytelling for teachers. How can teachers use techniques of storytelling to tell better, to explain concepts better in the classroom?
No,
I
it's a
want to
life
try
skill
and
that's applicable everywhere, right? I think
everywhere, it's
any
everywhere,
profession,
everywhere.
it's a life
Yeah.
skill. It's not a profession dependent skill, right? As a parent, as a spouse, as a teacher, as a consultant, as an investor, I think the Professor Damodaran of New York University, I think he says, right, valuation,
Ashwath, yeah.
Ashwath Damodaran, right, is as much about storytelling and the
Storytelling. As
story,
about
sort of,
numbers, yeah.
as it about numbers, right? So clearly, you're onto something which is in a way, it's a large market. It's not a niche market, right? In terms of a
And so
need.
again, yeah, as we were talking earlier, I'm not looking at it from the market
Of
point of view. I'm
course.
looking at, what is my interest. And, I really feel one lifetime is not enough to explore all my interests. But so for example, history, I'd love to do history storytelling talks, and, organize it. Yeah. So I can
And maybe
go
just
on
a
about this.
good time to ask the question, right, Ravi? The other piece I'm curious about as we sort of go back to flavor, right? I think I'm curious about how the shape of aspiration shifts over time. For me, at some stage it was a JE rank. At some stage it was a certain job. At a certain stage it was being a partner in this organization, whether it's McKinsey or Egon Zehnder. And now I feel it's a little more multidimensional. I'm curious about how it's evolved for you and where it stands today.
Yeah, so I don't think I'd had like very, very clear goals. It was a lot of the time going with the flow. Like, let's see where
Hmm.
this takes us types, right? So of course, when you're giving the CA exam, the first most important thing is please let me pass in the first attempt. That's the most important aspiration that any CA student has. And then yeah, so I think as I mentioned, the brand, right? So to work with a reputed brand was more important,
Hmm.
and somehow grow there and figure out again. No thing that I want to become this CXO. Nothing like that was there. Again, let me get into IIMA, and then life will be fine. So that it was there. I think after feedback, surprisingly, I didn't really have a thing that I want to rise to this level within feedback. So feedback, I was part of a smaller group within the consulting group, which itself was a small group, which was into healthcare consulting, hospital. We were working for hospitals, right? So as a group, we had an aspiration that we want to be the best in the country in this particular niche. It
Hmm.
was a smaller
Hmm.
niche, not a very large. And we were trying to work towards that. When I look back, I can see that, oh my God, you didn't do anything on marketing. There was no content development. What were you thinking, Ravi? Karke? But yeah, so I think that aspiration was there. Um, Moving to be able, I think the aspiration was to build a self-sustaining model to, without government dependence, can you make skill development, work? And, the aspiration was not so much towards any form of financial,
Hmm.
rewards, but for the amount of, let's face it, the social rewards that will come, right? In terms of the recognition, in terms of, wow, this is great. How did you guys crack this market?
Hmm.
So at that time, I think microfinance was already starting to feel some tensions, but there was a part, I think 2007, 8, when microfinance was really um, uh, celebrated as this brilliant new model where you are working for the underprivileged, and it is a for-profit
Hmm.
model that works well. And guys like Vikram Akula were
Hmm.
regarded very, very highly, right? So I think some of that rubbed off on me, that I wanted to kind of maybe be seen as a very uh, yeah, well-known social entrepreneur who's kind of
Hmm.
opened up something. And looking back, yeah, the sector itself, I don't think had the legs for it, but I don't think I had the entrepreneurial skills to
Hmm.
make any of that work. I think that same aspiration was with Captivator also, right? Where the
Hmm.
idea was, hey, we can actually not have these entrepreneurial genes and yet make something work by just being focused on a good product and the customer experience.
The only,
But I
if I
think
may,
if
sorry to interrupt, Ravi, I think the only piece I might ask you to also weave in, if you can, is when I say aspiration instead of ambition, I'm also looking for how people think about the various domains of life. As you get married, you also start thinking about, yes, I want to be a good spouse, good father, So I'm just sort of throwing it there, at least conceptually. All of us have professional ambitions, but I'm just I'm curious about how some of the other dimensions grow as well, just in terms of the kind of person you want to be. I'd be curious about how, if and when those kinds of things appeared in your, if appeared in your aspiration set.
so, I don't really have like a goal or aspiration.
Hmm.
It was more like be
Hmm.
respectful, be kind, be
Hmm.
empathetic to others. So
Hmm.
it's more like, the way I behave. I didn't really have an aspiration, and I tell this to my wife also, right? So for me, work is my first child. So even now
Hmm.
with storytelling, I like love my children to bits, but it's really, if for Praveena, it is clearly number one is Advait, number two is Swara, or number one is Advait and Swara,
Hmm.
and then it's her work, which is Amazium, right? So for me, I think
Hmm.
it's um
I
it's good, bad, ugly, I
No,
don't know,
fair,
but
fair.
it is right. So I obviously, I because of the work that I do, it gives me a lot of time. So I really enjoyed spending that time with the kids.
And if I may
And
come in, right, I think I love the words, right? You say, I want to be, in some of the coaching work. Very often we also talk about to-do lists and to-be lists, right? And instead of saying, I want to do X, Y, Z, etc., etc. If you focus on, yeah, I want to be empathetic, I want to be available, I want to be generous, I want to be kind.
mm,
That's a good enough
yeah.
aspiration in a lot of ways, right? If you can stay true to it and if you can make it happen, right? So I love the language. So completely understand. So all the limited point I'm making is, while you might frame work as your first love,
Yeah.
by sort of shining the light on who you want to be on some of the other elements as well, you're taking care of some of the other domains automatically, right? So
Yeah, and maybe to double click on the family part, right? I think I have a lot of childlike enthusiasm and love for not just storytelling, but for
hmm,
movies, for sports. I follow sports a lot, for some kind of music. So I one of my
what
the things that I
let's get
do.
specific, right? What sports and music, if I may ask?
So cricket, I read cricket for pretty much everything. If there's a India men's cricket team match or something going on, I would have read all the analysis and looked at all the highlights, and so especially what happens on cricket info. Music, it's a mix. So old Hindi is where I started. Then now I listen to a lot of Hindustani classical, some of the Hindi film music, but that's rare. Rahman, I'm a huge Rahman fan. Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel.
Lovely.
And movies would be like anything which has got a good narrative, good storyline, or some of these, unabashed big picture movies like Jailer. I'm a huge, huge Jailer fan. So the idea is that, what I love, I'm passing on that love and enthusiasm to my families. So of course, Praveena and I share a lot of this, but to my kids. So now Advait also hugely follows cricket and loves similar kind of music,
Of course.
and is so I'm infusing a lot of my love, and so it's for me, that is where I think
Of course.
I'm finding ways to bond with them, right? And so my devious plan is that, so Praveena doesn't like old Hindi music too much, because maybe she didn't hear too much of that when she was growing up. So I've kind of given up on her. I don't think I can transform her. But for the kids, right, so they obviously don't like if I play it, but often they're not even like in control of what's being playing. So if you're
Correct.
going driving somewhere, they're just having a chat in the background, I'll surreptitiously put some of those songs. And so I think I'm making them listen to that, so that when they are older, hopefully they'll say, "Hey, Dad, let's play those Kishore Kumar songs." So, and so I think that
Absolutely.
that's
I
yeah,
relate to
that
that. My son and I go and learn the guitar on Sundays.
huh.
That's my time to choose the playlist and play
Here's the
Ilayaraja,
playlist.
R.D. Burman, and
Nice, nice,
sort of
nice.
seed those thoughts. So anyway, no, lovely, lovely. I think moving forward, one of the other pieces I'm curious about also is this, if I may use the word, talent market fit, right? All of us
Mm,
need to find that as we go through our journey at various points in time. I also, in our, as we were sort of preparing for this conversation, you used the word skill stack,
Yeah.
which I loved as well. So I'd love for you to talk about how you've discovered your talent market fit, and what's been that journey like, discovery process at various points in time. And maybe
Yeah.
if
So
I
I
may add to that, just the last point is, I think what we consider talent also, that language evolves over time, right? I think we see ourselves with a certain lens, and that lens evolves over time. So yeah, I'd love for you to reflect on that.
Yeah, so this is also something that I think I've read about in multiple places, but I think first time in Scott Adams' book, right? How to win, how to fail at everything and still win big.
Hmm.
Where he uses his own example, which has always struck with me, right? Where he says that he's I mean, huge problems as a personality, but let's keep that aside. But he was a significantly successful creator of this comic strip called Dilbert, and
Of
Dilbert
course.
was funny. So what was surprising was that when he said that, to be a successful cartoonist like me, you don't need to have the best skills at any of the individual skills of cartooning. So you're saying I was not the best illustrator among people who illustrate. I was not the funniest person, and clearly I was not the best corporate employee. But I had this interesting, unique combination of being a corporate employee who was reasonably funny, who could draw reasonably okay. And
Mhm.
that combination is what made it unique, right? So I'm also, I think that that kind of left an impression in terms of, how, what is it that I can also build something which is different and unique. If I kind of go back, I think consulting skills was something that definitely was a useful building block in my talent stack. And within that also, right, if I dig deeper within the communication or the storytelling
Hmm.
part also, one skill that I would say that helps me is the ability to make sense of new information, to make sense of
Hmm.
data, to find patterns in information, right? I remember in CAT there are three papers, right? Math, English, and data interpretation. So math was always a weak part. I just scraped through. English was good, but surprisingly, I did really well in the third one, which is data interpretation. So I'm able to kind of look at new data and find, and this is also me looking back in hindsight and saying, oh yeah, that also ties up. There's this nice line where I think I forget who said it, but it says say that um, uh, I don't care about the simplicity on this side of complexity, but I do care about the simplicity on the other side of complexity. So where you are able to take in a lot of
Hmm.
information and present it in a way that makes it simple, right? So to
Hmm.
see that simple pattern in a huge complex mess of data. So that has been something that I have realized that I've been able to do that. A few examples that stand out are, I think one, way back in L&T. So my boss, the CFO, wanted a paper, like a white paper kind of a thing on. There was a telecom crisis happening around then. This must have been early 2000s. And I started reading and reading and reading. And typically what happens when you read a lot is you're like completely lost. Like, where is
Hmm.
this going? What is happening here? And eventually, I could see broadly some patterns that were happening, and I wrote the note to him, and he actually came and said, "Oh, that was useful, right? So that
Hmm.
was interesting. That was helpful." And I enjoyed that process, even though there were parts where I felt, "Oh, this is completely going nowhere," right? So, in fact, when during a creating a story, when I feel that, oh, this way above my head, it's going nowhere, I think it's a good sign. There means
Hmm.
there is the light. There's a light at the end of the tunnel that's going to come. Similarly, I think in feedback also there were parts where I would be working with somebody else and they would have found all this information, and we'd be kind of scratching our head saying, what is the point here? What is going on here? And I would kind of maybe sleep over it or something, and eventually that story will emerge, which will simplify, tie up all the threads together. So I think that is a useful skill. So even today when I teach, of course I teach the concepts, but often people will then share their information with me. So I'm now looking at the slide of a receivables manager or an HR leader or a technology guy, right? And I
Hmm.
don't know anything about their industry. I don't know anything about their work. And I'm reading all of this and trying to find patterns. Then often, some of them will be very obvious that, hey, maybe you can combine these two together. They're talking about the same advantage, why you're having these separate points. But some require a little more nuance. And that's fun for me to, in the moment, quickly find those patterns
Hmm.
with completely strange information. So I think that's a useful skill. Then I think writing has helped, right? So I used to write um, for reading, of course, was there since I was a kid, but I started writing somewhere in not maybe 10th grade, 11th and 12th and so on, right? So for example, when we used to go with friends for trips,
Hmm.
college friends, right? We would go for a trip to Mathiran or a Murud in Maharashtra, and we'd come back and I would feel the urge to write about that experience. So I would just write like a 3, 4 pager and share it just with friends, right?
And
And
I love what you said, if I may pause. It's not about writing, but it's the feeling, the urge to write. Yeah, that slightly different things. I know there are several writers, but to feel the need, if I may come in, right? When I used to read books, I used to prepare these 3, 4 uh, condensed PPTs
yeah,
to say, yeah, this is the net of the book. And somewhere I think that's where the seeds of the podcast were sown, where you say, yeah, I want to learn and share the learning in a
yeah.
certain curated way. So I love the word feel the urge because that's a very different thing. Writing skill many people will have, but not many might have the urge to sort of take a trek and put it in writing.
And I'm sure for you also, Deepak, it was not that you were thinking, oh, how many people will read this? Will they read it or not? You just wanted to get it out, right? And if people read it, it's fine. So yeah,
Correct.
and
Correct.
I almost have this feeling of, just like, it's almost like a pregnant with that idea, and it
Hmm.
has to be delivered.
Hmm.
And so there will be labor pains, but you'll at the end of the day love the result. So I think, yeah, so I think, and my mom's DNA and everything, I think coming through. So somewhere writing was always there. So that helps me today in writing when I see something, how to express that in a short way. Of course, on
Hmm.
LinkedIn I write, on my blog.
Hmm.
So I think that's a crucial part of the skill stack, right? So I can't
Hmm.
it's I think tough to be a storytelling teacher or a coach without having strong
Hmm.
writing ability.
Hmm.
So I think that's a crucial part
Hmm.
of it. I think teaching is another interesting part, right? So you could be
Hmm.
very good at figuring out patterns, at writing, but there are people who are really, really good at what they do, but they struggle to teach that to others,
Hmm.
right? So there are so many stories of brilliant players, brilliant
Of course.
cricketers who were not necessarily the best coaches, and people who were not necessarily great in the actual sport, but brilliant as coaches, right? And we have got so many examples around that. So for me, I think that teaching part is something that appealed to me from a fairly early space. So IIMA, I used to be attending, we used to call them REM sessions, remedial
Yes.
sessions.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
I would attend these REM sessions, anything that happens in math and A. But I used to be giving REM sessions in a few subjects. So one I especially remember, it was called economic EAP. Not What
Environment
was
and
the
policy.
environment and policy. Oops, yeah.
Correct.
So EAP 2 was one subject that I really enjoyed. It was more about economic history.
Correct.
Thankfully, no theorems and formulae were there, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, right? Because it was history and how India's independence, how the economic policies were taken, etc. And so I used to be the one of the
That's
few people
Professor
paying attention
Rakesh
in class.
Basant, was it?
Rakesh, oh,
Was he?
Rakesh Bandhu. Oh, I love Professor Basant. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I used to pay attention in his class. Used to take copious notes, and I used to love that feeling of others kind of leaning in and listening to your word, and you being
Hmm.
able to kind of share information with them. So that was a fun part. I used to do a little bit of these remedial sessions at IIMA and even at feedback. Apart from presenting to clients and going
Yes.
and getting clients, etc., there used to be parts where we used to run workshops for new joinees, right? Or people
Hmm.
moving in from one level to the other. And we were not big enough to say, okay, let's get people from out there. We would like, let's do it ourselves. So it was not easy because we didn't really have time, as you're already running behind client deadlines and stuff. But I enjoyed that process also of, converting what you know into teaching material.
Yeah.
So I think within a teacher itself, there are multiple skills that come into play.
Hmm.
How can
Hmm.
you break things down to make it easy? How can you avoid the curse of knowledge? How can you engage the class's attention? You have to be a bit of an entertainer also in doing that. So I think that's also something that I enjoy that part of it. So
Hmm.
I'd love to spend time with teachers to say, forget about the topic, whatever topic you're teaching. How can you teach that better? How can you teach
Hmm.
math better? How can you teach biology better? How can you teach
Hmm.
anything better, right? And there are, I think, repeatable. I have in mind a course that I want to do only on better facilitation skills. So, anyways, that's And I think so. Yeah, these are, I think, three core parts of the stack. Maybe a fourth I would add is relationship management and managing people, right? So
Of course.
I've like able to manage relationships in terms of, not over promising, delivering what you're kind of giving, generally being, respectful and nice. I know of others who can tend to be like, this is my product and take it or leave it, but I'm able to do a bunch of that also. So um yeah, I think um I'm grateful for all the growing up experiences that have given me a bunch of all of this to kind of, make me uh, enjoy this in a way that allows me to do so.
I think if I may ask you to maybe explore one of the elements, right? I think I truly believe follow your passion is good advice, but it's incomplete advice, right? Clearly, you've had a set of passions. I'm curious about, what are the mistakes you see people making? If I go back to this point of talent market fit, what are the kinds of places where things go wrong? So, what's been your experience in just sort of ensuring that what you enjoy, what you're skilled at, also has some sort of a commercial, leg to it? How have you sort of locked that?
No, 100%. Yeah. So mistakes do happen. I've also made those mistakes in
Of course.
following my passion, right? So I think the framework that we typically go to explain this is the Ikigai framework, which
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to flavor because it'll, I think, expand on that and make it more nuanced. But if you kind of stick to Ikigai, we all know about the four parts: there's ability, passion, the economics, and the social impact. And typically, we think that we are essentially, we know our passion and we know our ability, right? All we are trying to solve for is the market. We want to make sure that is there a market for this, and I would say in a captivator or whatever, that was essentially what we thought we were trying to solve for,
Correct.
right? And that is a great unknown. But the I think the lesson for me has been that all of these are unknowns. You actually don't even know, is it your even your ability something that you're actually testing out. So I would
True.
kind of say every thing is a hypothesis. Treat everything as a hypothesis, right? I think I've got a edge in this ability. I think this is what my interest or desire or passion is. I think this is what the market needs, and I think here's where the impact will be there.
I
So,
love it. I love it. It's much less deterministic and much more uncertain and much more evolving, right? Much more emergent, as they say, right? In terms of how things play up.
for me, Deepak, to take an example, right? I thought my passion was history. I thought, I've been reading
Hmm.
history books all my life, and this is it. And when you do that, forget about the fact that it may not work and others are disappointed, but you are disappointed that, oh, I'm not really enjoying this as much as I thought I should. Why am I not enjoying this? Do I not know myself? Right. And so
Hmm.
a lot of those negative sentiments come into play. And I actually realized history was not my passion. It was storytelling. I love the way stories were told in history, but I also love the
Hmm.
way Bill Bryson tells stories in science. I also love the way Shekhar Gupta tells stories in politics. I love the way Harsha Bhogale tells stories in sports. So that realization happened later. But earlier, when I was going through that, thing, I was thinking, oh, I don't know myself, right? So I think, yeah,
Hmm.
the treating every element as a hypothesis is useful, and then you really stress test it, right? You can't expect that what you believe will come, right? And that's where the balance comes. Sometimes you have to ride the waves, and maybe
True.
the interest will develop, but sometimes you have to recognize, actually this is not because I know people, by the way, who have left management and gone into history full time. And
Hmm.
I didn't have the guts to do that, right? And because it is
Hmm.
not really a strong passion of mine. So I think, yeah,
Hmm.
stress test everything, including your ability and passion, and yeah, that will hopefully lead you to the true goal.
No, that's a lovely point here. I mean, one of my podcast guests was a lady called Herminia Ibarra of the London
Hmm.
Business School, and she uses the phrase which I really love. She says, "You can act your way into a new way of
I
thinking,
love
but you
that.
can't think your way into a new way of acting." So I think that captures the essence of these transitions, right? You need to have certain humility with which you frame these hypotheses and test them, and if there's resonance, then you start drilling for oil. Otherwise, you go somewhere else and start drilling for oil, right? Lovely. A couple of things before we close this conversation, Ravi. I'm curious about how people build their balance sheet over time, intangible balance sheet. One is sort of self, investing in yourself. And I'm asking it in an open way, right? Sort of it could be health, physical health, mental health. it could be capabilities, it could be something else. And the last is relationships. And clearly, family we've spoken about, but I'm curious about what's been your approach to relationships in the context of work, in the context of friends, because I do think these two elements are particularly relevant given that we all are likely to live longer. So I'm curious about your experiences with these two dimensions, what you do.
Yeah, so I think given the nature of work, I mean, and we are in, right? So for us, on the intellectual side, this happens even without any prodding, right? So we're constantly absorbing and learning. So for me, really, that's the fun part. So if you kind of tell me, of course, unless I have to plod through a textbookish kind of a thing, which I struggle with, but most of the stuff that I pick up, like Adam Grant, I just read Hidden Potential, right? It was so interesting, it
Engaging.
was filled with so engaging. And I could easily read that in a vacation. I'm just rereading this book called The Elements of Eloquence, and it is one of the most entertaining books that you'd ever read, and it is a book on storytelling techniques, right? On figures of rhetoric. So for me, yeah, I think that
A book,
it's
a book on
it's a book.
eloquence
It's a
better be eloquent, right?
yeah, I
So
know, but yeah, but I have read books on storytelling which are not interesting. So, so this is great. Mark Fawcett is brilliant. So yeah, I think that is the biggest part in which investing in myself through reading, through podcasts. Play to Potential is doing such a big service, right?
Thank you.
Sajid Pai keeps saying this that uh, often if you want to pick the brains of top leaders, you will not be able to wait till they write a book, because who has the time to write a book? So the best way to actually know what they think and what they feel is to listen to them on a podcast, right? So it's a great hack that he talks
Correct.
about, that if you want
And
to
he
really
actually
learn more.
he goes further to say, if you want ROI on time, read the transcripts, right? 20
Brilliant.
minutes, you're done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
10
You're
minutes,
done.
you're done.
Yeah. And he calls himself a Visile for that, right? So yeah, I
Correct.
think so. Podcasts have been also a great way, and
Hmm.
the only thing that readers and listeners of podcasts and books would always worry about it. I don't have enough time. There are so many more podcasts to listen to, so many more books. So, but that's I think that keeps happening.
And out of
The
curiosity,
other, yeah.
I mean, we've spoken, and thanks for your attention on the podcast and the kind words on the Play to Potential podcast. But are there any others that you would mention?
Oh, there are many that have helped me. Now, recently, I am listening to David Perel, and he has some good interviews with people on the art of writing. I forget the name of it. Wait, it'll come. It'll be there on my phone. So, uh,
We
How
can
I
figure it
Write.
out.
How
Okay,
I
how I
Write
write.
by David
Hmm.
Perel. I love the podcast by Pushkin, right? So Malcolm
Hmm.
Gladwell, Revisionist History,
Hmm. Hmm.
Against the Rules, Michael Lewis,
Michael Lewis.
Cautionary Tales, Tim Harford. These are beautiful narrative, storytelling podcasts, just for observing the skill of how do you build a narrative. These are, I think, fabulous. Amit Verma doing incredible work in terms of, if you want to know about India, in terms of economics, in terms of history, in terms of current
Yeah.
affairs, politics. Very few resources that can be as good as that. Um, Tim Ferriss, some of
Yeah.
his interviews are very, very good. And yeah, so these have been some of, I think,
Got it.
the ones that have kind of influenced me the most. In terms of books, I'd mentioned Made to Stick, I think, as a big one. The Pyramid Principle is also something that has really been very useful. Um, Matthew Dix
Mm-hmm.
has a book on storytelling. I'm forgetting the Storyworthy. Storyworthy is also really good in terms of
Mm-hmm.
telling personal anecdotes. I think there's no book which is kind of, as good as that.
Mm-hmm.
There are a bunch others. I can share a link
Of
with you
course.
that I've kind
Of
of,
course.
that I've made.
And I can add that to
So
the notes. Yeah. Yeah.
the one interesting thing that has helped me recently, Deepak, and I need to do more of that, is to attend workshops or courses by others.
Hmm.
And there is this feeling that sometimes I have, I'm good. I know broadly stuff in the storytelling space, and I'm reading, right? What else do I need? But I realize that when I go to some of these courses, not all of them work out, but in some of them, I'll get an epiphany that changes the entire way I work, right? So, for example, there is a course that I did called Breakthrough Facilitation, and it was about the art and skill of facilitation, run by a Canadian lady who's living in
Hmm.
Spain. and global audiences. Typically, these are called cohort-based courses, right? CBCs. So I'd done that last year, I think. And it wasn't in the course material. It wasn't what she told me. All of that was quite logical. It was when I was in one of the breakout rooms grappling with a problem, then I realized, oh, the real learning actually happens. What I'm realizing happens in a breakout room. And I'm not giving my students at that time enough opportunity to tinker and play and discuss with other people. I'm spending too much time sharing the
Disseminating.
supposedly great content, disseminating that I have.
Hmm.
And I knew that in theory that I'm spending too much time talking, but for me to really realize that oh, I need to change, I had to go through that experience. So I had to get that breakthrough through that experience, right? So I also that shifted me in a big way, and I sometimes worry, Deepak, that I don't you know do more of that to
It's a great
just.
point you make, Ravi, if I may share. I think in the choices we've made, especially in this whole passion economy, if I may, if you belong to a firm like Feedback or a McKinsey or wherever, there is apprenticeship and there's an opportunity to observe your colleagues at work and learn just by being a fly on the wall. You see a colleague run a meeting, then you just learn from just being a part of that room. But when you're on your own, there's nobody. It's basically you're operating alone in a, maybe you're operating with a few nurses in the theater, operation theater. There's no second surgeon to tell you, what's working, what's not. So you're right. I think when you personally also for me, when I listen to, when I, sometimes when I'm working with clients, there's another group facilitator or somebody else who's playing the role of a coach slash sounding board in a different capacity. And just being a fly on the wall in that conversation just sort of triggers these kinds of things, saying, oh, maybe I can facilitate this way, maybe I can frame the questions this way, etc. So completely agree. All the more in the, if I may say, passion-driven solopreneur kind of economy, I think this becomes that much more important, I would reckon.
Yeah, so I think figuring out ways to go out of my comfort zone is been something that I need to do more of. Um,
Maybe just the last piece on the relationships part. How have you thought about, is there a certain method to the way you've cultivated the relationship? I'm not, again, once again, using this in a sort of the transactional networking kind of sense, right? Genuinely, how have you gone about, what's been your approach to relationships, if I may, outside of family and close friends?
so it's not been something that has been very easy for me, Deepak. I'm by nature a bit of a loner, right? So for example, if I go to a Bangalore or to a Delhi and I've done a full day session, I'm a little mentally tired. A lot of my batchmates would be saying, oh, who else is there? Hey, I'm in Bangalore, let's catch up or whatever, right? I'm happy going to a restaurant, nursing a cold beer and, watching something on my phone.
Understand.
So I think one part of it is I need to kind of go get away from that a little bit. So, but I do crave community. I struggle with a little bit of, so there's of course family and close friends, as you rightly said, right? But I'd love to be part of communities where people are coming together with some common interest, purpose, goal, or just enjoyment of something together, right? And for example, for me, it could be storytelling in history or science. It could be, some form of physical activity that I like. It could be just appreciation for craft beer, which I'm a big fan of, or is something which combines some of these elements, right? And I realize it's not easy to find the right people or so I try and of course do it with the friends and family that I have to the extent possible. And so one of my favorite pastimes is having nice deep long conversations with people, right? Especially over dinner and drinks. So um I, of course, do that at every opportunity that I get with my friends and family. But there are only so many that you get with them, right? So I'd love to kind of form communities around that. Um, Not easy.
Got it.
So
Got it.
it's not.
No,
It's something that I'm still struggling with.
it's an interesting point you make. For me, in a way, since you know the organization, social venture partners plays that role a little bit. It gives me a community to belong to, where there's a certain shared desire to contribute meaningfully to society. So when I left, sort of in a way, Egon Zender to be on my own, This in a way sort of gave me a bunch of people to hang out with meaningfully. Otherwise, I can imagine it would have gotten quite lonely. And you're right. I think if we don't have the community, we all have the opportunity to create that community around us. It just requires a little bit of work and maybe a little bit of research and planning and discipline. So, Ravi, it's been a wonderful conversation here. I think maybe just as we wrap up, uh, uh, I'd love for you to maybe say net, I think the theme of this series is actually about living a flavorful life, right? And each one of us trying to find the flavor that works for us as life unfolds, and find multiple flavors that's sort of fit for purpose as life context evolves. Any headline thoughts just based on your lived experience and your approach to life?
I think I'd go back to the point that we had spoken about, Deepak, about having hypothesis, right? And for me also, that's been the journey. That initially the hypotheses that I had were not even mine to become a CA or to join L&T. But from my IIMA days, I started having some of these hypotheses. In fact, if I kind of look back in many of the earlier transitions, many of them were um, more outside driven than internally driven. So joining IIMA was completely a friend who said, "Hey, I'm giving CAT. You should also give." "Oh, okay, I'll also give it." Right. And feedback, I was blown away by the speech made by Gopal and Mukesh and Monica. Aditya Nataraj's speech influenced me to get it. So it has been external influences which have played a role, and they have helped me form my hypothesis. And over a period of time, now I am um, forming these hypotheses myself. Of course, taking in a lot of
Of
external
course.
ideas, but it's not like I'm just copying and pasting somebody's idea on what I should do. But I think that broader point remains for me that even now I'm constantly thinking, am I completely happy in doing this? Which part is it that is not that I'm not fully engaged in? Which is the part where I feel that my client may not be getting the most value. So there is a bit of paranoia that's always there in my mind. There's a bit of that worry, and so I keep, making small tweaks, making experiments. So that experimentation and hypothesis is always there. The if I kind of look back at my journey, there were parts in my journey where I would fret, I would worry that, oh my God, this is not working out at all. Even during the training part, right? And in fact, in my 2017 was when I had reached out to a lot of potential clients, and we had a good run in late 2016, but early 2017 there was no clients coming, even for Sriram, and even the work that I was doing. And there was a period when I was like, maybe this is not for me, maybe this is not the right thing. So although I had found my calling by then, but even after you have quote unquote found your calling, it will maybe take some time to accept you
You also need to find the market.
to market, yeah. And
finding the calling also requires finding the market at some point, right? So for it to be
and the
sustained.
market is there, it may take some more time to recognize you,
Course.
right? So
Of course.
in fact, at that time I remember a book that really helped me, Daniel Pink, To Sell Is Human, where he says that we are all in sales, and a crucial part of being a salesman is you will be faced with an ocean of rejection, and you have to be buoyant in that ocean, right? So that helped me at that time. It made me feel that it's okay, it may not happen now, but it will come. So even if you get your hypothesis right, the market part will take some time. So yeah, I think that to stay the course, but to keep listening to your heart, that balance is what you have to try and to balance, and keep trying to look for the right flavor, not ikigai. That'll help you
No, I think,
find your joy in life.
and once again, right, I think Ikigai, I genuinely feel has a role, but I feel, I mean, it goes back, I don't know if I shared it with you. It goes back to a quote by Lincoln that one of my friends shared with me. And he says, he's talking to somebody, and that guy says, what about your principles? What about your true north? He says a compass would point you towards the true north, but the compass often has no guidance for the swamps or the ravines or the mountains or the ditches or the wells that you will encounter. So I think there is a place for true north, I feel. But I think hopefully this gives people a little bit of language around navigating the swamps and the mountains and the
It's a beautiful
valleys
analogy.
as they go through their journey. Hopefully, it's a little more granular, it's a little more context specific, and the fact that there's no right answer. And as you write, I love the phrase you had around almost taking a scientist's approach, right? Have hypotheses, keep testing them, And somebody, when I spoke to Dr. Ramachandra Guha, who'd written the book about Gandhi, many books about Gandhi, I think he said there's a reason he titled the book My Experiments with Truth. He didn't say My Views on Truth, because it's finally we're all experimenting our way through these things and having hypotheses and testing them. So lovely, Ravi. Very, very energizing and inspiring. Thank you so much for making the time for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Deepak. I look forward to the book.
Thank you. A couple of things struck me about Ravi. One is just the clear distinction between wants and needs. It's fascinating for him to articulate very clearly what gives him joy and what's the line above which he doesn't get more happiness from more money. So I think sometimes just having a clear distinction between wants and needs can lead to a lot of contentment and joy. The second thing I found fascinating was what he said about how we describe ourselves. He said that initially he thought he was interested in mythology, but over time he realized that what he was passionate about was actually storytelling, not mythology. Even in my case, initially I thought I was passionate about people. That's what took me from McKinsey to join Egon Zehnder. But over time I realized that actually I enjoyed helping people, and in search I was spending a lot of time evaluating people. And just tuning into that distinction has made all the difference. If you like this conversation, I hope you will find some of the other 5 that we have as part of this Flavorful Life series valuable. And if you want to go deeper into some of the insights around how to do inner work, how to lead a full multidimensional life and play to your potential, do consider picking up the book. The link to where you can buy the book is available in the description section of the video. Thank you for listening.